So, dear participants, now please allow me to start the session. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. As you all know about Indra Gandhi Delhi Technical University for Women, we are the only government women university in India which is providing technical education in different branches of engineering. Apart from that, we are also having our courses in management and architecture. So, as you all know that Anveshan Foundation is an incubation center with the status of a separate Section 8 company promoted by this university, IGDTUW, and we are funded by different state government and central government programs and schemes. Right now, we are having total 15 incubatees, and in all the different phases of facilitation which is provided by our incubation center, under pre-incubation, our E-cell, that is entrepreneurship cell, is working very actively to organize such kind of programs. Previously, as you all know, we were organizing all those programs in the campus offline, but after COVID, we are organizing these programs online. In this particular program, we are having a series for the mentoring session for startups and those who are there in the ecosystem of startups in India primarily. So here we conduct in every session we conduct expert sessions by two different speakers. This is our eighth series where we are having two sessions. Both the sessions are in the domain of intellectual property right. As you all know, intellectual property right, some right on your that property which is not physically there, means something there in your mind and you are actually trying to get the benefits of your properties in the actual sense, maybe globally, internationally, maybe in India, maybe in country specific. So there was a requirement from long back that we should have sessions on IPR also. In Anveshan Foundation also, we are having a policy of intellectual properties. Their faculty members and incubatees, they are also funded apart from the fund grant which they get from the Startup India scheme. So whenever if you are having any people, those who want to join Anveshan Foundation as an incubator, we are facilitating so many ways. We are also having a provision of providing seed fund to the new incubatees. So there you can apply, you can go to our website, which is anveshanfoundation.org. So now today I am elated to give you a chance to interact with one of my friend, Eric Azule. Eric Azule is basically from Nexus, and Eric is Masters of Science in Technology Commercialization from the University of Texas, with a remarkable experience in the startup ecosystem worldwide, especially in international marketing strategy. He has managed commercialization and incubation projects in 12 countries around the world and sold two logistics companies, one in US and one to Russia. As president of the Alliance for Commercialization and Innovation Research, he currently runs the Nexus Innovation Hub and Incubator in New Delhi, which is funded by US State Department to promote the startup ecosystem in India. In just 3 years, startups of his incubator has raised more than US $6.7 million in funding. Prior to the Nexus, Mr. Azule was the director of the World Bank Innovation Program in Kazakhstan, where for 2 years he was involved in their National Technology Commercialization Center. Under his leadership only, the center created a multi-million dollar small business commercialization grant program and incubated Kazakh startups to bring their innovations into the market. And Azule is also running cohort programs in the American Center, Nexus Incubation Center. Already 10 cohort programs have been come out from this hub, and presently applications for the 11th cohort that is there, you can apply there only. The good time is this, that Corona also has some benefits to give it to you. Now you can apply from anywhere in the country. Means the program is online, so you can apply anywhere from the country, and you will have good chance to interact and to have good relation with the people and the mentors who are associated with Nexus Incubation Center. Eric, thanks for accepting our invitation. I welcome you in behalf of IGDTU Anveshan Foundation. And this crowd is, which is a combination of people, mentor, startups, promoters, budding entrepreneurs. They will definitely be benefited to have an interaction with you. Thanks, Eric. Please.
Right. Well, thank you very much, VK. It's a pleasure to be here. And working with Indra Gandhi Delhi Technical University has from the very, very beginning. So we appreciate your collaboration and your friendship. As you mentioned, my name is Eric Agelay. I'm the director of ACIR. Here in India, I run the Nexus Incubation Center. And again, this is funded by, as VK said, funded by the US government to help Indian startups. As faculty, if any of your students are having startups that are past the idea stage, or if you are a startup yourself and looking for incubation, go ahead and we're accepting applications for our 11th cohort. You can go to www.startupnexus.in. It's a 9-week program. As he mentioned, it's now virtual. It used to be physical. It's now virtual because of the situation. But we bring international and Indian experts and kind of have a very structured curriculum where we bring startups all the way through their path on commercialization. One of the best things that we have about this is because it's funded by the US government, it's absolutely free. So we don't charge equity, we don't charge commission, it's all free. So take a look, and if you're interested in that, then please, we have the applications open for another couple of weeks, and our next cohort will start on October 4th. Or if you want to reach me personally or reach some of our startups, I'd be happy to give them information. VK knows how to get in touch with me. But having said that, he's asked me to come and speak to you about intellectual property, and happy to do it. I think in India, especially, intellectual property is a little bit undervalued by startups and by universities alike. And so I'm going to give you the perspective from running an incubator and having run my own startups, having my own companies as well, what intellectual property means in a very practical sense. I do want to mention right off the top that I am not an IP lawyer. So I think you're going to be having an expert coming right after this, and they are experts and they are IP lawyers. So you can ask some of the specific questions there. I'm going to be taking you just from the experience I have of over 2 decades of working with startups, working with incubators, doing licensing agreements, valuations, etc., from my perspective. So again, kind of from a perspective of knowing what it means for startups and what it means maybe for faculty. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll go through this presentation. I believe we have about an hour. Is that correct, VK? And I do want to leave time for questions at the end.
Right.
So, we'll go on until about 4 o'clock, I guess. And then we have some time for questions and answers. So I'll go ahead and share the screen. I'll start going through the PowerPoint presentation. But even though we have time for questions at the end, if there's a burning question that happens right then, feel free to interrupt and just, raise your virtual hand or butt in. And I'm more than happy to try to address that question. We can discuss this as we go along. I will have some questions for you to get a little bit better understanding of where you're coming from and how much kind of the intellectual property landscape you know. So having said that, let me go ahead and share my screen here. And again, you can either through chat or you can message or directly say if there's some questions you have here. Here we go. So again, I'm not an IP lawyer, but intellectual property can get pretty dense and pretty boring pretty quickly. So I want to recognize that. I'm going to be giving you an overview and not getting too much into the details. Again, I know more than the average duck, but I'm not an IP lawyer. VK has also asked me specifically not to go into intellectual property in general, but to focus on patents. So I'm going to be talking to you specifically about patents, not the other forms of intellectual property, which we'll go into. We won't go into, excuse me. So what do you need to know about intellectual property, either from a faculty perspective? Maybe your dean says you need to either start making more patents on your own or be aware of commercialization with the e-cells and help them with their patents, maybe working with the licensing agreements, maybe doing sponsored research. However the case may be, let's talk about that. Let's see. There we go. And again, I just want to mention that I'm going to be talking about this for about 45 minutes to an hour. During our Nexus incubation program, we have a whole week dedicated to intellectual property. And even that is just touching the surface. I tell all of my startups that what my goal is, and my goal here during this presentation, is to give you enough knowledge to know when you have a problem and when you need to go to the experts. Intellectual property, filing your patents, this is not a DIY thing. This is not something you should be doing by yourself. You should not be filing your own patent. But you should absolutely know the benefits and why you should have a patent and how you can license it and what you should be patenting and what not to. So I'm here to give you kind of an overview. It's understood that I'm just scratching the surface and there's a lot more information below. But what I want you to come away with is when you're working with your startups, or if you're a startup yourself, knowing when you should be talking about intellectual property, how you can protect your intellectual property. Do you even need intellectual property? Some companies don't. And know when it's time that you either have a problem or that you need to go to the experts to go ahead and formalize your rights on that. So that's kind of my goal for this presentation. Let's start just very generally. What is the goal of intellectual property? The goal is very specific. It's to generate revenue. If you're a professor, the idea of having intellectual property versus research. Research, the concept is you take money and you turn it into knowledge, right? We hire professors, we do some sponsored research, we buy some equipment, we invest money in the infrastructure. At the end, we have knowledge. We have some new breakthroughs, we have some innovation. This is what we're spending money for, and we're now advancing the terms of human knowledge for humanity. Whether it's applied or basic, the idea is you take money and you get knowledge. Commercialization is the opposite. That's where we take that knowledge and we turn it into money. And intellectual property is one of the ways we do that. When you have intellectual property defended and you have that acknowledged through patents, specifically we'll talk about patents today, there are very direct and indirect ways. There are two ways, indirect and direct ways to get money out of that. One is that you can license your intellectual property, license your patent to somebody else, and they will pay you a fee. Whether it's a royalty or a startup, a lump sum, we can talk about that. But basically, they pay you money and you give them information about your technology. That's the direct way of making money off of this. The indirect way is that as a company, you may have something that gives you a commercial advantage. So by having this and protecting your intellectual property on a process or a piece of equipment that makes your company better, and whatever that word better may mean, you can then gain more market share and earn more money through your customers. So this is what intellectual property does, is give you the access to these ways of commercializing, of making money off of your ideas. And that's the whole point of intellectual property, is to give you a legal basis so that you can go and make money off of your knowledge. This, and I don't know specifically on your faculty what kind of policies you have at your universities and how you're working with your startups or even the professors themselves if they are patenting things. But here's kind of a roadmap that we use when you're talking about intellectual property as well. Understand what kind of IP that you could have. Trademarks, like I said, logos, copyright, patents, trade secrets, and then understand more or less what your strategy is before you're selling, or if you're faculty, absolutely before you start publishing. Find out and make sure you are absolutely clear on this, and your university and your faculty and your dean, everybody's exactly clear who is the owner and who is the author, who is the inventor. Very different things, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. As you start working with companies, if you have a patent and they want to license this from you, protect yourself so you don't give away this for free, even if you didn't mean to, through NDAs, these are called non-disclosure agreements, or if you have a piece of material equipment, material transfer agreements. These are ways you can protect while letting them see the value of what you have without giving it away. Then you establish your market strategy, and then you agree to the inventor's role in the business, whether he or she's going to play an active role, or once they license it, they sit back and they have nothing to do with the company. These are kind of, in general, your best practice for IP management. I'm not going to go, we could spend a whole week just on this, these different sections. I'm not going to do that, but if we have questions later about any of these steps in here that you want to ask more questions on, please let me know. I'm more than happy to go into it in more detail. But let me start off with this. In your estimation, again, I just want to hear people's either through chat or just set out. How much do you think a company will pay for a good idea, right? We're taking ideas and we're patenting them maybe. But in general, how much do you think a company will pay for a good idea? Let me hear your thoughts. Any either put in the chat or just shout out what you think. What do you think? Anybody got any ideas? How much will a company pay in the marketplace when you've got a great idea and they want to use that idea?
10 million.
Ishan says $10 million. Okay. Prashant,
Yeah.
Vats, what do you think? Prashant? No?
You all can unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
absolutely. Just unmute or,
Yeah.
okay, there's some people in the chat here. Let me see what that says there. 1 million. Somebody says through an angel investor. Somebody says any amount if it's positive. So, you know, it's not really a fixed amount. It depends on how good it is. 1 billion. Wow. Somebody says $1 billion. Okay. Depends on I guess, on the industry. Anybody else? How much would a company pay for a good idea?
It depends upon the invention.
Depends on the invention. Very good answer, right? I mean, it depends on the invention that you have, how much value you're adding, how much they can make money in what industry it's in, right? So that's a very good answer. Only the idea? Yes. Akshant, I'm saying the idea. Just the idea. I'm reading off the chat here. Anybody else? Okay, well, let me go back and share my slide again. Nope, let's see there. Depends on the profit a company makes. Very good point. So it really matters how much more money can they make using your idea, right? Depends on the future strategy a company has with the idea. Again, how that fits in to their selling, also true. Let me go back to my slide share here. And actually, this is kind of a trick question. Because the idea, and again, somebody asked this, says only for the idea? And I'm saying yes. How much are they going to pay for the idea? The idea that a company, how much they'll pay is nothing, right? If you don't have anything protected, oops, hello, hold on there. If you don't have it protected by intellectual property, they'll take the idea. They may even say thank you. And then they go and commercialize it, make all the money, and they don't give you 1 rupee because they don't have to, right? Intellectual property is the whole point of giving you a legal defense so they do have the property. Companies only pay for assets and only when they must pay for them. So it doesn't matter how profitable it is. Matter of fact, the more profitable it is, the more incentive they have to take that idea without paying you 1 paisa. And so the whole point of intellectual property is it makes it much harder for them to do that. And we'll talk later about valuation of different ideas of intellectual property. But the point is the idea by itself, unless you protect it, there's no moral obligation for them to pay anything, and they won't. And I've got several stories here I could tell you about, unfortunately, where professors, startups, inventors believed in the goodwill, believed in saying, hey, I have a great relationship with this company. They're interested, they want to test it out, that makes sense. So I'm going to go over there and work with them, and then later on we'll work and we'll get the actual deal done. And the company brings them over and works with them and uses it and gets 90% of what they need to get, and they say thank you and that's it. And then the inventor is left with nothing. So this is why it's crucial to have intellectual property around your idea, whether it's going to be, again, patents or trade secrets or copyright, etc. Let's talk about different types of IP. I'm going to go through this very quickly because, again, VK asked me just to stick with patents. Basically, your overview of what you have here, you've got patents. That's what we're going to talk about. There's copyright for written things. And this tells you what it's for, you see in here, and how you can actually get that protected. Trademarks, right? These are kind of distinctive brand, either logos or symbols, designs on the actual design of something. And you'll see there on the picture on the left, on the far right, that gives you an example. So like the Coca-Cola bottle is actually protected by a design, right? And trade secrets at the end. These are ideas that are some information that you have that's commercial value that you are not publishing and you're keeping secret, and how you do that. But these are just a very basic overview of what different types of intellectual property are, but we are going to focus specifically on patents. So let's talk about that. Some more questions. This is a key point here, very key. The difference between the owner and the author. And the author, I'm talking about the inventor here. And both as a startup and as if you're faculty, you have got to know this. And this is extremely important. So if you are the inventor at your university and you come up with some genius new idea and you decide to patent it. And the university says, great, we will help you, Mr. or Mrs. Professor, we will file the patent for you. And they pay for it. And you're like, great, you are the inventor. They are, because they have filed and they've paid for it. And if you did not agree on this, they are the owner. And from a commercial sense, that is a very big deal. So let me give you an example. My brother works for Dell Computer in Austin, Texas. And the company asked, Dell Computer said, hey, a couple of years ago, we're really going to try to start increasing the value of our intellectual property. So you want a certain level of executive and higher, go out and try to find new ideas and patent those. So he did. And it went through a review process and several layers. And at the end of the day, they said, what you've done is great. And we, Dell, are going to patent this. So they applied for a patent and they got it. So my brother got a little plaque that says, Jeff Aguilé, you are the inventor of this process, computer process. The owner is Dell. So when Dell goes to talk to Samsung or LG and they decide to talk about cross-licensing or they're going to sell this license, do they ask my brother for his permission? No, they do not, right? He is the inventor, but he's not the owner. The owner controls all the commercial aspects of that patent. So, and it's crucial you understand this. So let me give you another example, an easier example. Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare, the author. When Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet, he is the author. No one can change that. But he may have written that by contract to a noble, to a prince, to a king. They said, oh, please write me a love poem to my love. And Shakespeare says, okay. So he writes it, and he's the inventor. But then he sells that idea, or he gives that because he was under contract to the king. So the king is the owner. The king can take that and publish it, or sell it, or license to anybody else. Those ownership rights can be sold and licensed and given to other people. And Shakespeare does not have any control over that. But the author will always be Shakespeare. So the idea of the scientific invention, the technical innovation of what you've come up with, either as a startup or as a faculty, that is you. But when you file the application, whoever files the application, be it the university or somebody else, you have to make sure, if that's interesting to you, that you are listed as a co-assignee, as an owner. Otherwise, you will have no input on the commercial aspects of what happens later, whether it's royalties, whether it's selling, whether it's licensing, anything like that. The university say, oh, we'll do that, but that is only because they wish to. It's not because they have to. So as long as you understand that, and you understand with every patent you work with, that's a very clear distinction. And I'm not saying, like in many intellectual property, I'm not saying one way is good or the other. Me personally, I would like to have control over my patent. I want to have commercial aspects of it, but not necessarily. You may not. You may be looking at for tenure and you have to do a couple of patents and you want the intellectual publicity for that and visibility. And that's perfectly fine. But if you're going to get involved in commercialization, if you're going to be selling this and license this to a startup, or your startup's going to license to another company, you have to make sure you're on the ownership. And this has happened if you're a startup, especially. If you develop this when you're a student at the university and you're using their laboratory, you have to find out their policy. Is that, do they have ownership of the patent? 100% or even part of it? If it's 50-50 and you want to then take yours and sell this to Tata Trusts, well, you have to get their permission first before you can do anything. So just be aware that there's a huge difference between the commercial side, being the owner of the patent, the assignee, and the author or the inventor. And they are two different aspects of that. Does that make sense, what everybody's saying? I want to go back here and stop sharing because I think I saw some questions in the chat. But I want to make sure that this is very clear and you understand this. Let's see. Okay, there's just some other things, other questions. Again, I want to pause because this is such a crucial point. If anybody has any doubts of this or they don't understand, unmute yourself and ask. Let's talk right now at the beginning before we go even further. If you're all good, just give me the thumbs up or say yeah, and we'll move on. Does everybody understand the difference between owner and author? Arjun, thank you. Nice. You can use those little thumbs up signals, right? So Arjun and Akshat says, we got it. Totally clear. Yes, all good from Paramit. Yeah, what if our idea is taken from another country, says Nishant. We will get into that because again, the rights of, that gets a little more complicated, but we will discuss the rights of that and whether you are able to do that or not. Okay, so I think like everybody is pretty much on board with this and they understand that difference. If not, again, maybe you can wait to the Q&A or if you have something to say, let me know. But right now, it looks like pretty much everybody understands ownership versus authorship. We're all good. Can we get intellectual right over that taken idea? Yes, no, you cannot. If somebody already has a patented idea, you won't be able to take that over unless they license it to you or you have an agreement. Right? That's what buying or selling the rights were. So if I'm Shakespeare and I'm the prince that ordered that from Shakespeare and I have the commercial right to Romeo and Juliet, and you, Nishant, said, hey, I want to be able to publish Romeo and Juliet. Sell me those rights. I say, okay, here, this cost you 100 rupees, and now I hand those rights to you. Ownership rights are transferable. How much? That's up to you in negotiation. Inventor's rights can never be transferred. Nobody can say, I can't buy it and say, you know what, Eric Agelet wrote Romeo and Juliet. That you cannot do, and those will never be transferred. All right. If it's patented in another country, can we patent in our own country? My favorite answer to everything in startups is it depends. It depends when that was patented. When that was patented, there's a certain amount of time that you have or somebody else has to take that opportunity to get coverage in another country. So if I patented it in India, once I file, I have 12 months to then decide, do I also want to patent it in Germany, in the United States? If I do not, and that window closes, then nobody else can patent it, right? That is now considered public knowledge. When you patent something, you're patenting it very specifically in a territory, usually a country. India, the United States. So you have rights in that country. You do not have those same rights elsewhere. So if you patent something in India, and then the 12 months expires, you are still protected in India. You have a patent that lasts for 20 years now in India. But then I could take that and sell it in the United States. So could a bunch of other people. It means I don't have that right myself, but it's open knowledge now. So you wouldn't be able to patent that in another country, but you could use it. And you could do it without any legal consequences. Let's see. Copyright, again, VK asked me not to talk about copyright, but the short answer is that once you write things down, you automatically get copyright. You can register it, but again, I'm not gonna go into too much detail here. And how much it'll cost to file a patent in India, it's not that expensive. And again, your expert will talk to you about the specifics. If you are a registered DIPP startup, you will get a discount on filing a patent in India. So it's really not that expensive. I think the fees maybe 20,000 rupees, something like that. When you start filing in different countries, it gets real expensive, like the United States. But for India, it's not that expensive at all. Okay, let's see here. Let me go back to what we were talking about. So everybody understands owner versus the author. Good. Next question. If you get granted intellectual property patent, we're talking about patents here, how much does that guarantee your success in the marketplace? Now, I'm going to go ahead and just jump in here because it's another trick question. Nothing. A patent granted to you does not guarantee you or tell you anything about how successful you will be in the market. All it tells you is that you have something that's new that somebody else hasn't done and meets the criteria of a patent, which I'll talk about. But it tells you nothing about the success or lack of success that your product or process will have. Let me give you an example here. Come on. Oops, there we go. These are two very famous patents I'm sure you've seen all over the world. The first one is the very famous diaper for birds. You can put this on your pet bird and it will prevent them from going to the bathroom all over your house. And this was received a patent. So has this company or person made, are they a unicorn? Have they made $1 billion? I don't think so. I've never even heard of it. Right? But they got a patent. It's an official patent. You can look this up. This copy of this drawing came from the patent organization. So the second one, let's go to the other one. This is a patent for a machine that will blow out the candles on your birthday cake. See the cake there? And you get a little rabbit and there's some bellows there. So this is a very interesting machine that if you get it set up and running and you put the cake in front of it, the rabbit will blow out the candles for you on your birthday cake. It's definitely unique and they've got a patent for it. There's some interesting mechanical devices in there. Was it incredibly successful commercially? Probably not, I don't think so. But I'm just using these as kind of jokes to show that if you have a patent, that does not guarantee you commercial success. Now, it helps you to be able to sell your invention. It'll help you add some value, absolutely, to those companies who are interested. But the question is, just because you have a patent does not mean they're interested. It's still, some of you already mentioned, they still have to find out how does this help them? How will they make money? So a patent is a good thing, but by itself doesn't mean so much. So let's continue on here. A few things here that people have on misconceptions about patents. My patent gives me the right to make it, sell, or sell my invention. Actually, no. What they call a patent is a negative right. So it just prevents other people from making, using, or selling your invention. So you have that right, but you're preventing other people from making and selling theirs. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have the right to make this. For example, some inventions are illegal, right? You can't patent drugs, right? They just won't do that. More importantly, and more commonly, your invention may still be blocked by somebody else's patent. And I'm going to talk about that right now. And I'm going to use a very simple example. Somebody has patented the book. Here it is, Bill. Bill invents the book, and he claims in his patent that this is what describes his invention, which is the book. So, any paper-containing unit with a front and back cover, and it's got a spine to bind the pages within it. That's a pretty good description of the book, right? So that's what he claims his book is in his patent. Also, he describes the cover as the border, that's paper and lightweight. He then goes on to say, and there's a spine that can have up to, 100 pages. That's what the design of the book is, and that's what his claim is for the book. And he is given that patent. So Bill now has the invention on the book. 2 years later, Jane comes up and says, I can make a better book. So she makes some improvements on this. Now she says, I'm going to file a patent on the cover can be made of anything. I've now discovered how to make a cover out of wood, out of plastic, out of steel, any material that can be covered with paper or fabric. That makes it much bigger, the claims for what she has for a cover. Also, she's now invented this fantastic new spine, the binding. So now she goes, I can include up to 1,000 pages, way more than Bill's book. And she gets the patent because those two things are actually innovative and new. Innovative, new, same thing. So she gets the patent for this, but she can't sell her book because the basic underneath that of just having a book in general is still covered by Bill. So she, to be able to sell her book, because it builds on the first patent, she would need agreement from Bill to license hers, and then she can do her book. So even though her book is new, it still is built on top of the other patent. And this is why it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a patent that you can sell.
पर अर्जुन सिर्फ मेरा दोस्त नहीं है, मेरा विंगमैन भी है। इसका मतलब ये है कि मेहनत मैं करता हूं और लड़की ये ले जाता है।
Hey, I know this stuff is boring, but try to keep the other TV shows on a minimum at least so we don't hear them, right? If you have any other questions besides that, if you're listening to comedy shows, let me know. But I hope you understand the point here of a book, and that doesn't mean that necessarily you can sell your IP. Number two is that by having a patent, you can stop others from using it. Again, the answer is not necessarily. All that does is give you a ticket to go to court, and then the lawyers will figure it out. But usually, just by having a patent, that will be enough to scare off other people from trying to use your patent. So it is a legal barrier, but it's not an absolute certainty. Number three, I've never seen anything like this in the market, so therefore I should be able to get patent on this. Not necessarily. Just like we saw with the bird diapers or the candles, just because something's not popular in the market doesn't mean it's not patented. So there are lots of things that are patent that you won't see in the market. And whether you know it or not, if you infringe on theirs, you are still liable. You are still able to be penalized. So make sure when you get to this point, you're going to actually go to an IP lawyer to make sure what you have is called freedom to operate. Yes, it's new. Yes, it can meet a patent, but does that still allow me to go sell my thing? Or am I like Jane and the book where I have to get a license from somebody else? And I'm not expecting you to do this. This is the kind of work that you wouldn't need to do, that you would need to go to an expert for, but you need to be aware of this. So patents are expensive. Somebody asked a question here. In India, it's not that expensive. You should absolutely go ahead and encourage your startups or you yourself to patent and file that in India, especially if you're a startup. Like I said, you will get some subsidies from Startup India, I think DIPP, to pay for some of those lawyer fees to file these. So for India, you should absolutely be filing for patents. If you're going to be going international and you say, okay, I don't want to file just in India. I think this invention will have some great market possibilities in other countries of the world. Then that starts to get more expensive. But there are ways you can delay that and to lower those costs as well. So at the end of this presentation, if you have questions specifically about that, about filing international using the PCT, talk to me and I'm happy to answer those. So legally here, what is a patent? What is the idea? The idea is that you've come up with something interesting, but you're going to publish it. You're going to tell the world about it, and you're going to disclose that. In return, the government says, fine, we're going to give you this right only to you for 20 years in a specific country. So we want you to publish it. We want this to come out and let everybody know what it is. But we're going to protect you so that you have the right commercially to get a profit from this for 20 years. That's essentially what a patent is. Okay. There are 4 things you have to meet criteria to get a patent. 1, you have to show that it actually works. What this is called is reduced to practice. So you can't just have the idea and say, oh, I think this works. You have to show that it actually works. Before, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, you would actually bring a model of whatever you had to the patent office, and you would show them how it actually works. So you can't just have the idea and say, oh, I've got this machine that, like I said, perpetual motion machine, right? You start it and it'll create energy forever. Well, show us that it works first, reduce it to practice, then we can give you a patent. 2, that's number 1. Number 2, has to be novel, has to be new. It can't already be out there in the world. So you can't, if somebody forgot to patent the telephone in India, you can't go and take that information from the United States, bring it to India and say, okay, I'm patenting in India now. You can't do that. Number 3, it has to be not obvious. Meaning, if I invented a pen, and here it is, I put it in blue, and I got some metal here, and then you came along and said, oh, I'm going to take the pen, and I'm going to make the same thing, but I'm going to make it green. It's not inventive enough. It's a little bit obvious that you can make it in a different color, so you won't get a patent for the green pen. And finally, this is usually never a problem, it can't be something illegal. For example, drugs. Right? You can't patent that. That's all a patent is. Again, look here, there's nothing about the commercialization, there's nothing about the commercial success of this. You just have to meet these 4 criteria. So, I talked about one of the biggest concepts is author versus owner. Second biggest concept you really got to know is what's called the priority date. And that means who gets this first? Because many times around the world, people are working on the same thing. And how do you determine who gets the patent? Whoever files first, you have that date. So when you file today, even though you may not get the patent for another year or two, because they're investigating, they're reviewing, they've got questions, but you filed today. As soon as you file, that date is the date that your protection starts. So in 2 years from now, when you get your patent, the protection actually starts from the day you filed. And that's called your priority date. So that's just to make sure that, hey, I filed today. And in India, it takes me a year and a half to get a patent. What happens if 2 weeks from now, somebody in the United States files and for some reason, their patent is granted in 3 months. So their patent actually comes out before yours. Well, no, you have filed before theirs, so you would have priority and they would not be able to do that. Okay? So the priority date is very important for you to understand. If you're faculty and you plan on publishing in a peer-reviewed magazine something about your invention, you've got to be aware of your priority date. If you have filed today and then you publish an article in 2 weeks, you're actually covered. Right? If you publish today at a conference and you go talk about it and you say, don't worry, next week I'm going to file my patent, it doesn't work that way. It's too late. So you have to understand the priority date to make sure when your coverage starts with your patenting. Okay? So, and there's some dates down here at the bottom. Is that basically once you file, let's say in India, you have 12 months to decide if you want to file in other places. You have 12 months of free time to discover, do you want to file in Germany? Do you want to file in the United States? Do you want to file in China? And if you decide after 12 months you do not, and you don't file those applications, then you are still covered in India, but you are not covered in those other countries, and other people can use your idea because it's published. That does not mean you should be filing in all those countries, because that is very expensive. But you should know this. And if you think you've got some really good potential for international market, there are other ways to prolong that from 12 months to 30 months with what's called the PCT. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A if you have those. So again, 12 months, that's what you got to understand. You have 12 months of time once you file. So one of the things you can do before you start paying a lawyer for a lot of these searches is do some of these searches yourself. You've come up with an interesting invention or a process or a piece of equipment, and you want to find out, hey, has anybody else invented this before? Is there any other patents out there? You can do this. And all these databases are publicly available and are free. So you can do some basic searching just to see who else is out there. If you're a company, as a startup, you should be doing this to find out who might be possible competitors or who might be possible companies that might want to license your technology. So these might be competitors or they might be potential customers. And this is all free. So WIPO, right? World Intellectual Property Organization, under the United Nations. They have, right here, they have a database. You can go into other countries and you can take a look and see who has patents filed. They also have something called the PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty. This is something that all these countries have agreed upon, that if you file an application under a PCT, they will use that application you have filed for application in their country. However, there is no international patent. There's an international application, which makes it, once you fill it out, you can then file in different countries with that application, but you will not get an international patent. So anybody that tells you and says, my piece of equipment, they are lying, or they don't know what they're talking about. So be very careful about this. The PCT only gives you some extra time and makes it easier for you to file in these different countries, but it does not give you protection in those countries. You still have to file. It just gives you some more time and makes it easier for you administratively to file. And you can see there's 153 countries. Everybody's pretty much a member of this treaty. United States Patent Trade Organization. There's their link up there. You can take a look there and search for patents in the United States. I keyword, by people who's the inventor, by the applicant. So you can have it by the owner or the inventor. All these keywords are here. Take a look. If you know the patent number, of course you can put that in there too. Here at the top, I just gave you a link. This is a link to a video the US Patent Trade Office gives out on how to search. Because it's a government website, sometimes it gets a little complicated. So they've actually made a video and saying, hey, watch this video. We'll show you how to do a patent search, show you how to look through our database to see what's in there. European Patent Office. For everybody that's in the EU, they've created a unified database for all of their patents in the different countries. Take a look there. Again, I give you the link. And there's the actual search space. The first one was the homepage of the patent office and organization. And this is the actual link for doing the searches. These kind of searches, you'll come up with a lot of data. And what I usually do is I'm not reading the whole patents. Patents are long, complicated, very dense documents. But I'm looking at the executive summary, what they call the abstract. That tells you who did the claims, who owns it, very basic about what it is. And that is usually enough information for me to find out who's competing in the space or who might be interested in licensing my technology once I get it patented. Don't like any of those? Just go to Google Patents, right? So search on Google Patents. Again, it will go through most of the databases. It's much more user-friendly, and you can get the same information. You can take a look there. Search by title, search by inventor, search by keywords, search assignee, which is the owner. Any of these you can put in there, and that will give you the data you're looking for these basic searches. In our Nexus, we will have our companies actually go through some patent searches and figuring out how to do this and looking for competing technologies and competing companies. So there's a summary of all of them. I include the India IP office there as well. All of these organizations. If you don't find it in one, go ahead and look in another. Sometimes there may be gaps. But again, this kind of data for you as either a faculty member or as a startup is invaluable. It's free. Once you get the hang of it, it's not that tricky. And again, I'm not asking you to be an IP lawyer, but there's a lot of competitive data and market data here that you can find just by searching the patents. Take a look at it. Whew. So I went through this extremely quickly, especially because we started talking on the questions there about some of the more details. But so I see that we're like 10 minutes till 4, and I want very much to give you the chance to tell me what's interesting and what you have questions on, because I understand some of you are faculty members, some of you are from incubators, some of you are actually startups. So you may have very different questions about different aspects of this, of intellectual property for patents in general, and specific questions about something that may be related to you. So I want to kind of go through that relatively quickly to give you the general idea and let you ask some questions so that I can kind of answer some specific requests that you have. So please, I open it up. Let me know what kind of questions you have, whether it's about licensing or royalties, or I could go on, but I mean, you tell me what's specific and more relevant to your needs in the Indian startup community.
Thanks, Eric, for informative session. Now I request participants that if they have any questions, they can write in the chat box, or they can also unmute themselves and they can ask questions. I think two questions are already there in the chat box.
Yeah, so let me see. Is there any method, this is from Articade Jane, is there any method to obtain a patent in all 153 countries under the PCT? Yes, you can apply in 153 countries, but nobody does that. It's way too expensive. So do you really need to apply for a patent in Tanzania? Probably not, right? Do you really need to put this in Iceland, right? What is the point of doing this? Remember, you can sell to Iceland. That's not a problem. It just would stop somebody in Iceland from setting up a manufacturing in Iceland and producing your same product. What's the likelihood of that? Don't know. You have to then kind of decide where your market is. Who are your competitors? What are the biggest markets? So usually people will go for the big markets. I want a patent in the United States. I want a patent in some countries in Europe, maybe in Russia. Depends on where you're really looking at. And they won't bother with some of the smaller countries because the time and effort and the cost just don't make it worth it. If, one last thing, I said there's no international patent. The EU is working on it, but they don't have it yet. There is one exception to that. These countries of the former Soviet Union, Russia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, there's several countries. They actually do have a patent for those countries. It's called a Eurasia Patent. So if your product or service you expect to sell into that area, you can get a patent that covers, I believe, 7 countries in the former Soviet Union. But other than that, you have to apply in each individual country. So the short answer to what you can, I mean, technically, yes, you could, but is there one way you can apply once and get that protection for all 152 countries? Unfortunately not. Okay. Let's see. Can you share the PowerPoint? Yes, I will share my PowerPoint. If it's interesting to you, I will share it with VK. And anybody who wants to look at it, please. You're happy to use it. It's copyrighted, so don't go selling it. But if you need it just for your information, you're happy to. I'll be happy to share that. Let's see. In a patent, do I have to clarify the working as well? The point of getting approved by a patent is to show that it works. So you do have to show the process. You can't just say, I have a patent for a flying car, right? You have to show how that works and show somebody. So theoretically, the idea is that I could then take your patent and create that flying car. Now I'd have to pay you for that, right? Because you own the patent, so you own the intellectual property. But the idea is that afterwards, once this patent expires, anybody could come in and based on that patent will know how it works and would be able to create that flying car. So yes, part of the patent application process is in the document, and this is a complicated document, showing how that works. So if you have a industrial process, you'll have to tell them, hey, you have to heat my liquid nitrogen from 93 degrees to 96 degrees in this range and keep it under a pressure of this and make sure that it coats that. And you have to go pretty much into the detail to explain that. Let's see, what else? So if we apply for a patent globally, which is new in our country, but already in other countries, can we do business with the same idea globally? So let's take an idea of an iPhone. I'm going to be very general here because an iPhone actually has like hundreds of patents inside of it. But let's just assume Apple did the one patent. And they patented the iPhone, and they patented the United States, and they forgot to patent it in India. Now they didn't, but let's just say they did. So this would be the same thing as what you're saying. Hey, it's patented in the United States, but can I now go and sell the iPhone in India? If they didn't patent it in India, you actually could. Now, you would still have to set up manufacturing and you do all of these different designs and all of that, but theoretically, yes, you could actually do that. You could not patent it. So you couldn't say, okay, I'm the owner of the iPhone in India. Everybody else could too, because this is public information if they didn't patent it there. And remember the other question, did you want to patent in 153 countries? And I said, do you really want to patent in Tanzania? Probably not. Well, if you patented and you did not do Tanzania, somebody could take a look at your flying car and say, okay, I understand this, and I'm going to make a flying car in Tanzania. And they could. They wouldn't have exclusive rights. Anybody could do that. But yes, they could actually do that. Could you take your flying car from Tanzania or your iPhone in India, and you are legally allowed to sell it in India and make it in India? Could you then produce it in India and sell it back to the United States? No. That's because now you're infringing their patent. They are protected in the United States. So you can't sell into the United States. You can manufacture in India and you could sell in India, but you couldn't sell or produce it anywhere where that is protected. Okay, does that answer that question? Let me see here. Compulsory license in a patent. Your expert that you're going to be talking to, next thing we'll probably talk a lot more about this. I'm assuming what that means is that for specific kind of technologies, there may be a compulsory license to the government, to India, because it's in their national interest. So I'll just make something up. If you developed a new vaccine for COVID, right? And you said, I've got it and I've patented it. The government of India may come in and say, okay, but this is in the national interest. So you have to give us a compulsory license and we will compensate you for that. But you have to do this. You can't just say, no, it's $1 billion and I'm going to sell it to Russia if you don't buy it. The government sometimes can step in and say, either from a military point of view, a state secret point of view, or national security, or they can do a compulsory license requiring you to do that. It's extremely rare that that happens, but they do have that right. And I think if that's what you're talking about, if not, add in the chat and I can ask, we can talk about it a bit more. Let me see, what's another question here? Can we protect any social science research, like some educational framework? Good, very good question. And the answer is kind of, it depends. So you cannot patent ideas, right? Hey, I have a new idea about how to teach children. Let's teach with more interactive society. You can't patent that, but you can patent the methods of how you're doing that and the framework. So if you have a textbook, you could copyright that. If it's a specific method like that you can prove is different than just, that has different than other methods, you could patent that like you patent a business model, but you can't just patent an idea. So when you talk about social research, if it's an educational research on statistics, you can't really patent that. You could copyright that, right? But if it's an educational point of view, then other universities could be able to, as long as they say, oh, I got this from you, they can also quote that from educational point of view. So research is hard. It really depends on what the outcome of that research is and how you can protect that. Normally, that would be in copyright, not under patent. But if it's a very specific model and how you would work on something or how you would do some education, it's possible you could patent that. It's possible. But again, if you want to just publish your research, that would come under copyright. How does patent protect from importing? Well, again, let's say you patented this pen and you patented it, protected it in India, and you did not protect it anywhere else. In the United States, they could take your knowledge and produce it in the United States, and they could sell it in the United States, but they would not be able to import it into India. So you are protected in India. Now, what happens when the Chinese do it anyways, right? What happens when they just steal your intellectual property and say, not my problem, and they start importing it? Yes, that is a problem. We live in the real world, it happens. It is hard right now in India with the courts to get adequate protection under intellectual property, especially if you are a small company, startup, or university. The use of intellectual property for me, it makes you more attractive to being acquired or getting licensed by another company. So if you're going to be selling this and exporting this or working in the United States and you want to find partners there or agents or distributors, intellectual property is a very large, important part of that. If your company, your startup, is growing and you think you're going to be taken over, you're going to be bought out by Tata or Reliance, intellectual property is something that can definitely increase your valuation. Will it automatically protect you from Chinese importing and stealing your intellectual property? Well, I mean, legally, yes. Practically, it's hard to say. In the United States, the intellectual property laws are more strongly defended. It's a much bigger issue, and so it's easier to defend them. In India and other countries I've been in, it's not so easy. It's harder. So usually though, let's be honest, for startups, nobody cares about you now because you don't make any money, right? So I wouldn't worry about that. It doesn't cost much money to patent or put your copyright or logos in India. So it doesn't take much time, doesn't take effort, do it anyways. Afterwards, when you're making a bunch of money, it's much harder to go back and do that patenting. But right now, it's not that hard, and nobody pays attention to you. So that's a good thing. And that gives you some room to grow and to make your market and get some resources and become larger before you have to start worrying about these things. But the point is, do all this now when it doesn't really take that much time or effort, and you can do it relatively cheaper. And like I said, it buys you 12 months, right? You don't have the money if you're a startup right now to buy a patent in the United States. Probably, you just don't. But what you can do is you patent it in India, and you have 12 months. And after 12 months, maybe by that time you find out if your startup's bigger. What if it's not? You're still kind of struggling. There are other ways you can do that. I mentioned this PCT. That will buy you another 18 months. Now, after that, after 3 years, basically, then you should kind of know, is this worth it or not? Then you can decide, hey, I can spend the money to protect myself in the United States, in Germany, right? In Australia, in Japan, Korea, or not. So you've got all of this time specifically kind of figure it out, but you're still protected and you still have that time. So that's kind of where, for me, the patenting comes in place. It's a very easy and cheap step now. So go ahead and do it. And it could be extremely big for you later. If it's not, hey, you spent 20,000 rupees. You probably spent more on that on just the documentation for your startup. So it's not that big of a deal. But if you don't do it and you become successful, and of course the whole reason we're doing this is because we think we're going to be successful, then it's much harder to go back and start claiming that. And it might be impossible. And you would have missed out on a big opportunity. Let's see, are there other questions in here? Can we patent mathematical algorithms? Very interesting question. And I'm going to pass that on to your next expert, because copyright software in the United States, there's a difference between patenting the algorithms. Can you patent software versus copyright? And which one is which? I always get confused. I can't remember. I think in the United States, you can patent software, and the rest of the world, you can't. You have to do copyright, or it's the other way around. So there is a way to protect it, is what I'm saying. But whether that's a patent or a copyright is a different matter. So I will not to lie, I will leave that to the next expert. You can protect it. It's just a matter of which method is allowed in each country. Let's see here. Lots of ideas in my mind and some on notes, but how I decide which one is good to work in the future? If answer is action, then what is procedure of action? That's also an extremely good question. And what we do in our Nexus incubator is really take you through that process of decide, hey, you've got 20 ideas and 10 of them you kind of research, you thought, these are actually 10 interesting ideas for a business. How do I decide which to go forward? How do I decide which one is the most interesting commercially or not? How do I figure out what's worth my time and effort to spend my time and effort on? And that's what we kind of take you through. And I wish there was just an answer that I could tell you, oh, just do this and this and you find out. It's not, it's complicated. If it weren't so complicated, everybody would do it, right? And that is the heart of being an entrepreneur, is you've got something, you believe in it, you're passionate, you think you can change something, you think it's a good business idea, you launch it and you see what happens. Does the market respond or not? We take you through all these steps to try to reduce those risks so that you just don't do it blindly, that you can solve some of these questions before you launch, before you spend lots of time and money in there. Because it's kind of scary to launch your own company with these new technologies. But I absolutely understand, and I know what it's like to have 5 or 6 ideas and you think they're all pretty good. Which ones do I launch my company with? But those are good problems to have. I'd rather have you have 5 or 6 really cool ideas and you've done some research and these could be the next unicorn, as opposed to sitting around and having no ideas and saying, okay, how do I make a startup? Those are good ideas good problems to have, is when you have too many ideas and you really just need to validate which ones are the best. So I think, do we have time for a couple more questions, VK, or are we out of time?
No. We should wind up now.
Okay. So I thank you. I hope I answered some of these questions. It was extremely brief. Just look at that first slide with the iceberg. Yes, that was just the tip here. VK knows me and he's got my connections. If you have some questions later that you think of, or I didn't get to answer them here, send them to him and he can write them up and he'll send them to me, and I will try to respond and he can give that information back to you. I will also send this PowerPoint if it's of interest to you. If you're a startup and you're past the idea stage, please take a look at the startupnexus.in. Again, VK can tell you all the details. There's a lot of information here, and I don't mean for you to get overwhelmed by the complexity of it. Intellectual property can get pretty dense,
Right.
but my question is just don't get scared of it. There are some very easy steps you can do. I'm sure your next expert will tell you how to file, and it's not that expensive and it's not that hard in India. So take those basic steps to protect yourself, and then as your company grows, you can take those further steps or not, as you decide. But it is something that will absolutely add value to your company, and especially if you're thinking of licensing or going international. So don't ignore that. That is my advice to you. But VK, thank you so much
Thanks,
for giving me
Eric.
the platform. I appreciate all of you being here, and I hope it wasn't too boring. You didn't fall asleep, except for the person who was showing
It
the comedy
was
show.
very informative, very pragmatic. You filled it with so many examples, not only limited to India, but worldwide. Thanks, Eric,
Yeah.
for joining us. It was really very useful session. I'm 100% sure that we will get very good feedback. Instead, we have already started getting very good feedback.
Well, thank you again very much, VK. I appreciate it. Good luck to everybody. And if I can be helpful in the future, you have VK here, so he can connect you to me. And I look forward to seeing your success in the front of the Financial Times or the Times of India then. But thank you very much, VK. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And the next session would be from KNS Partners, Mayank Sood. He is also a very good friend of mine, and I know him from last 5 years. He will be informing you everything about Indian formalities which are required when you go for filing patent. I request you that you can again join us at 4:20, please. 4:20 again, you can join us. We will be having second session with Mayank Sood. And the feedback form, I think that will be shared after the second session or within the second session. Rahul, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is the information about the feedback?
The feedback form will be shared in the second session, in between second session, for the both session combined.
Okay, second session we will start at 4:20. Just a minute. Yeah, Eric, once again, thanks to you. Okay, bye-bye. Yeah. You are not properly audible. There's so much attenuation is there. As it was already discussed to you, that will be sharing in the second session. So please join us back at 4:20.